Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I'm one of your hosts here with co-host and author extraordinaire, Angela Belford. Today, we are going to be talking about continuing our conversation on traveling light and some of the topics within there. This is a topic that people probably, you might have needed a while ago, but, better late than never. We want to talk about what happens when you fall off the wagon. You're doing the healing work, you're doing, digging up these toxic barrels, you're going through all this stuff, you're feeling your feelings. And then all of a sudden, like, blah, this bad habits, old self comes out, and you're like, well, dang it, what was the point? Why did I do all this work if this is just going to come out in these hard situations? We are going to be talking about that today. Angela, any like opening warm up thoughts ever happened to you?
Yeah, so, this episode is going to come out the week before Christmas. Many people traveling to see their family members at Christmas time. And I've had the opportunity for a couple of weeks in December to spend some time with my family. And it's so interesting. I've literally said to my friends, oh my gosh, I have a certification as a life coach. I know better. I've written a book about this, and I cannot stop from being triggered by these family members. And I know they don't mean to, but my goodness, it's so interesting to be around people that have known you for a very, very, very long time, and they know all about your triggers. And it's not just current. It'll be like, oh my gosh, you have done that thing since I was 9 years old. And it drove me crazy when I was 9. And 40 years later, it still drives me crazy, right? And so I am acutely aware of falling off the wagon after spending a few weeks with family members and a family emergency and a difficult situation. I'm acutely aware. So,
What I kind of want to start at the end. We'll circle back, but I mean, if this happens to somebody, you fall off the wagon, like what advice would you give them or encouragement within that space?
number one, welcome to humanity. We've had an episode, I think, when we had Leah Davidson on, where we talked about the goal is not 100% perfectly balanced nervous system, where we never feel any extremes, where we are just, 100% zen all the time. It's quite boring, actually. So, welcome to being a human, number one. Number two, the most important thing is your response. I love there's a saying in AA that says, you aren't responsible for the first thought that comes through your mind, because your mind, your body, just triggers thoughts. You are responsible for how you respond to that thought. You are responsible for your next set of thoughts and actions. And so the most important thing I would say after Welcome to Humanity is responding in a way that is full of grace for yourself, because you are going to experience setbacks. Like, that's just part of it. I love the little success thing that has, like, everybody thinks it's this one straight journey. And in fact, it's like all these little squigglies of up and down and up and down and up and down. And so I would say that you have to have grace for the journey and appreciate that this is just the way life is. It's never, ever, ever going to stay the same. And you're never going to just be 100% of the time perfectly balanced. Maybe if you're a hermit and you live out in the middle of the woods and you never have other humans, maybe you can control that. But if you want to be in relationships, you're going to have some triggers, you're going to have some upset, you're going to have some setbacks. And so the most important thing is to respond to yourself with grace and not beat yourself up and say, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? I should know better than this. Blah, 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 blah. Stop it. Yep.
Well,
that makes sense.
And I think often you talk about the voice of the critic in your head, and that a lot of this work is trying to calm that critic. It's not necessarily to silence them and to eliminate them and, take out a SEAL team mission to get them out of your brain. But there is uh, a reassurance that we want to give ourselves that that doesn't need to be the first response. And when this happens, put you pretend that you is a friend or a child or a parent or somebody that you love and care about. Would you say all the things that you're saying to yourself to that person? Say it to their face out loud, looking them dead in the eye. As the kids say, no cap, like go for it. Um no, almost always you never would do that. You would never look at yourself and be like, how could you screw up so bad? Like what a horrible person you are. That's just not what we do to other human beings, and yet we let ourselves do that to ourselves all the time. All the time. Neither Angela or I are not guilty of this. Like we both have done this, and we're here to call for it. Let's stop. Let's stop doing it.
Absolutely, we have to be kind. I would say also, I love that you said someone that you care for, because I have seen that sometimes we treat our family members like the worst. Like the only person we would say the things that we say to ourselves, we say to our family members. So really do like think that through, like your best friend or, the person that you want to be the kindest, that, your best friend's daughter, you wouldn't say it to them. And so I think that is, it's an interesting caveat. I've had a shift in perspective the last few weeks and recognizing just how our default is to not be the kindest to ourselves and to those closest to us. And it really is, I don't think it's for our best good to be that way. I think thinking about ways and tools, and be happy to start unpacking some of those that we can employ or use to be able to be a better version of ourselves.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know it's sometimes it's the end of the day version of yourself that the people closest to us end up getting. It's the one who is spent, who has used all of your emotional regulation capacity and fuel for other situations. And that sucks and it's hard. And also, it is sometimes real that that's what happens. I, in addition to being kind to ourselves, is something that we're going to recommend. I would love to talk about what about when falling off the wagon impacts the people around you. So it is that end of the day moment and you yell at your kids, you snap at your husband, you know, behave in that way. Then what? What do we do in those situations?
Yeah. And again, welcome to humanity, because I think this is real life. What every relationship will have a break. And that break may be, I say break not in the way of like teenager, we're on a break, nothing like that, but we'll just have a moment where we are not super in alignment and we're not connected and we've had an argument or a fight. And from an attachment theory standpoint, that is like the attachment has broken. And so psychologists talk about this idea of repairing. And I would say that that is definitely among the most critical tools for us to be able to develop within ourselves, is the ability to repair relationships, because we're going to have moments where we're not at our best. And so that repair can look different depending on the type of break that it was. If it is just that you snapped at somebody, then, that can be as simple as, oh, please forgive me. I am tired. I'm at the end of my rope. I didn't want to, I didn't mean that. Please forgive me. I've recently become a little more attuned to the word I'm sorry, probably because of so many of the belief things that are in this book, Traveling Light. I'm, I'm not enough. I don't have what it takes. I'm not lovable. So don't love I am statements. And so I am sorry is not the most ideal way to repair, in my opinion. I think it is more true to say, I would like to apologize, or I apologize for this behavior, this action that I did. Will you please forgive me? And sometimes the person may be like, I'm not ready to forgive you yet. I want to talk about the impact. And I think that part of the repair process is allowing someone to talk about their experience. And it's hard. It's so hard, because then you're like, I just told you that I know I sucked, and now you want to unpack how much more I sucked. But if they're talking about like, no, that really hurt me because you used something against me, or I had my guard down and I thought you were safe, and then it turns out you weren't safe, then all of those things make for a very it's just a really uncomfortable conversation, I think. And so here you are, I've already wasn't at the best part of me. And then now I have to try and be emotionally available to apologize and to listen and hold space for somebody else to not be okay for a minute, so that we can ultimately repair this and reconnect. That's what we ultimately want, right? And that's going to look different if it's your kids, depending on their ages, or your husband, or your spouse, or I'd say your husband, I mean your spouse, or your, siblings, or parents, or a friend. It could be a friend as well.
Well, and I think that one of the things that sort of is striking me is that it's the desire to repair the relationship and to own up for the things that you may have done that are, not kind, outside alignment of your values, whatever that might be. I also don't know that that means like every time you snap at somebody or yell at something, you're doing something wrong or having fallen off the wagon, actually. Because I think that there are plenty of times where holding a boundary can look really firm and can look really sharp. And that may not actually be um, something to apologize for. And I think that there's just a really interesting nuance, throw a dollar in the jar, but also just balance of what is it like. There are times where you might feel like I'm going to be more firm than I used to be. That's not falling off the wagon. That's standing up for yourself. That's holding on to the things that are important to you and not allowing other people to treat you in a way that is intolerable. I don't know what that looks like in every situation, I'll be honest, especially as we look at like holiday gatherings and families and work, end of year work deadlines where they're like, can we just do one more thing? Like some of the times it's just a no. It doesn't have to be an unkind no. It can be firm without being firm and kind. It's figuring out what's the right answer for you. What are the answers that you're comfortable with, and following through with that. And when we don't do something that's in alignment with who we are wanting to be and how we are wanting to behave in the world, those are the moments to really own and recognize the impact that you have on others.
So it's interesting because when I'm in my coaching practice, when I'm working with somebody about them holding boundaries, from my perspective, the goal, I'm not saying we all get there and that we all do it, but the goal is to hold a boundary without being angry.
Mm-hmm.
But so many of us take and take and take and take and take. And the only time we finally hold a boundary is when we're angry. No, I'm not going to do it. And then that does result in us expressing that anger. And so, and there've been clients that are like, that's absolutely impossible. And I'm like, it's not impossible. It's difficult for sure. And so I think that if you hold a boundary, but you do it in a jerk sort of way, you may end up actually still needing to apologize for sounding like a jerk. And and you may still need to forgive yourself for sounding like a jerk. So to me, you really have to you have to assess this, because there's also times when people will be like, oh my gosh, you were such a jerk to me. And I'm like, no, I wasn't a jerk to you. I was very kind and I was firm. And I said I wouldn't do this thing. That does not make me a jerk. So I had to reconcile in myself. I didn't need to apologize because I wasn't a jerk. I just held a boundary. And I know Sami, I think we're going to, here in January, have to do a boundaries episode because Sami's been pushing me on that. But I just express to you what I'm not willing to do. And as long as I do that in a way that is kind, even if it's firm, and I can remember with kids, like, can I please? No. Can I please? No. Can I please? No. And they've also been in situations where people just won't hear you unless you scream at them. And there have been a couple of times where I'm like, I'm not going to apologize because I actually told you 4 times. And I had to, by the time you finally listened to me, you seem to not hear me unless I scream. So yeah. I'm actually not going to apologize for that either. But you gotta really get to know yourself, and you gotta really dial it in. And it's so careful. You have to look at it so carefully. I have a friend that we decided that we don't love to apologize, and so we use that lack of desire to apologize and that hating to apologize to use more self-control. And so when I'm tempted to be a jerk, then I'll be like, ooh, but if I'm a jerk, then I might have to make amends. I might have to apologize. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I don't want to apologize.
I think that could be a really good motivator for a lot of people. What is it that you want to avoid, and what steps do you need to take in the now to avoid that? When you also talk about getting to know yourself, and so much of this is specific to who you are and what your experiences are and all of those things. If all of this is happening and whatever is going on, and you still have that feeling like, ugh, I fell off the wagon, I've tried, and I just keep messing up, something else that could be is an indicator light. Maybe that doesn't have to be catastrophic, why bother trying kind of mentality, but like we've been talking about all along, that's interesting that I feel that way. I wonder where that comes from. I wonder what is sparking that. I wonder when's the first time I felt this way. Those kinds of questions, when you feel what's the point of even trying? Because I think that's really the risk here, that if we're going to get down to the heart of the issue, we're not worried about, or, individually or collectively falling off the wagon. The concern is that we won't get back up. And that's where we really falter, and where truly, I think that's where failure is. It's not messing up. Failure is choosing not to try again. And when you start to feel that, how much greater can it be to instead tune in and maybe let yourself feel that? Sometimes that, it just feels like there's no hope for me. Okay, we don't have to shove that away immediately, but we can say, what is there for me to learn from this feeling? What is my body trying to tell me? Like we talked about last week, doing a body scan, and where is that showing up for me? But just rejecting it and pushing it away and saying you're not welcome here is probably not actually going to help us get to the other side of that feeling. That feeling that no matter what I try, it's never gonna work. It's probably tied to some feeling like I don't trust myself to do this. Maybe I'm not enough to do this. Maybe I'm not worthy of living a life with good emotional regulation and healthy relationships, or one of the other beliefs. That would be my hypothesis and theory for all of you, and Angela and myself included, is that when we feel that way, something else is going on.
Indeed. And I think that the tool that I want to kind of talk about next is like, so then what? You have this indicator that kicks off that says, oh, wow, I just want to reiterate over and over and over again the importance of breath work and breathing, because oftentimes when we get activated and someone, triggers us and we feel like we're hitting fight, flight, or freeze, our body is perceiving danger. You cannot take a deep breath while outrunning a tiger, outrunning the neighborhood dog. You can't. Your body won't let you. So when you are able to consciously take a deep breath, you actually send a message to your body. This is not life and death dangerous. And also, when you take a deep breath, it also automatically it it uses a second tool that I think is important, and that is pausing. It is literally taking a beat and being like, let me check in with myself here. Let me check in with what is going on right now. What are my five senses telling me? What does my mouth taste like? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I touching? What am I tasting? Like the whole thing. And going through that process while you're taking deep breath will help you with the pause. And it gives your prefrontal cortex a chance to come online and go, okay, you want me to do a diagnostic on this indicator light. Okay, let's look. Let's take a look. Let's plug the computer in to your brain and try and figure out what's happening right now. Oh, look, there's a human in front of me saying sentences, which is a third tool. So far we've got breathing, we've got pausing, and recognizing, oh, there's a human. They're saying sentences. These are some really critical skill sets that are very easy to learn, very hard to
So
employ.
I want to take a moment, feel your feelings, Angela. You can go hang tight. We'll come back to you. Take a little side scoochy over. Left brain entrepreneur, starting businesses and kicking butt and taking names, Angela. You're telling me breathing works? Come on, like our left brain side of our brain is like that just feels like somebody telling you to calm down when you're mad, which doesn't sometimes help to tell somebody who's mad to calm down.
Just
What
by
do
the
you
way, I
think?
would say 90% of the time, telling somebody to calm down does not help them.
Yeah.
It usually results in them getting more mad. I say that it does. I know it's the dumbest thing, but I'm going to go ahead and point back to James Nestor's book, Breath. Breathe, breath. Which one is it? It's got an E on it.
Oh, then it's breathe.
Breathe.
But I actually think it doesn't have an E on it, and I think it's breath.
There you go.
Breathe, breath, whatever it is.
Whichever. It's kind of a weird set of words. Anyway, we now I feel like Ted Lasso. Plan, 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 plan. Um, anyway, but we'll put it in the show notes. But anyway, that book goes into deep dive on the importance of breathing. And I think it's fascinating that breathing is one of the few functions in our body that is autonomic. We breathe without thinking about it, and it can be conscious where we can force ourselves. Like you can't force yourself to digest. You
Or
can't
your
force
heart
your
to
heart
beat.
to beat slower or faster. You can't make it do that, but you can control breath, and breath doesn't need to be controlled. I just think that's so interesting. And
Also
so,
blinking. But that's a different tangent. I just was thinking about, oh, blinking is another one like that. I can
yep.
blink. Anyway, tangent, breath,
That's okay.
ADD.
There are so um the fact that it does have that conscious and unconscious concept to it probably is why we take it for granted that it might actually work. But
Mm-hmm.
what I love about that book, Breathe, is that it is now, did you look it up? I heard you
It is.
typing.
It's breath.
Okay, Breath. Um, that book, Breath, what it talks about is the idea that there's all of this ancient wisdom around breathing, and then now science has caught up and
Yeah,
science
that's
has done the studies.
the subtitle is the new science on the lost art, or vice versa, something of that nature.
Yeah,
The new science of a lost art, and showing how what people were doing for thousands of years, we now have the data behind it to show why it was working, to show why different religious practices have 7 to 12 second sort of mantras. that flow actually does something to regulate our body.
Mm-hmm.
All sorts of other things. That's just one example.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also because I had this opportunity to be with a family member that had COPD and had a stroke, and we were on very close watch for pneumonia, and had a pulmonologist explaining the importance of expelling stale breath out of your lungs, and just how critical that is, that if we are not using those bottom portions of our lungs and practicing like expelling, that's meaning breathing out. So many times we say take a deep breath, and we really mean take a deep breath in, but there's also this whole practice on breathing out and the importance of that. And it was fascinating to have that a pulmonologist explain that to me, that that was what the risk is when you're laying in a hospital bed, is that you don't breathe as deeply, you don't make sure you push all your breath out, so therefore there's no movement in those lower parts of your lung, and it's very dangerous. And so that's why I love the box breathing as a way to calm yourself down. Take 4 breaths in, hold 4 steps, exhale for 4, and then hold for 4 more, a count of 4, and continuing to increase that box breathing. I think it was that book, or maybe I just made this up on my own, but I actually tried to flip that, where I would pull in longer, or pull in a breath and then try to exhale for twice as long, just to practice that thing that James Nestor talks about, of the importance of breathing, really for the idea of being conscious and present and where you are, so that when you're activated and triggered and you feel like you've fallen off the wagon, then you can bring yourself back into the space where you are.
And I think that that's something that you can do whenever. You can
Mhm.
do in the moment when it happened. You can do after the moment when you might look back and say, dang it, it's not how I wanted to show up. And still, I'm going to practice taking the breath right now and
Mhm.
bring myself back to where I want to be, centered in who I am and how I want to show up in this space, and then be able
Absolutely.
to make the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you don't look obnoxious when you're sitting at the Christmas table if you're taking a deep breath. If you're like, I'm going to stretch, I'm going to go for a walk, like you bring attention to yourself, you can breathe pretty innocuously.
I would recommend breathing pretty innocuously, because you can also make a show of it, and maybe that's not going to contribute to it. The big,
Uh,
like, no, I'm just breathing, I'm just regulating. Yeah, don't add the eye roll in with it, those kinds of things.
yeah.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what are some other scenarios that you feel like you fall off the wagon? Besides being, we talk a lot about being around family.
I think at work, I have plenty of scenarios in which trying to figure out, and not just me at work, I have a pretty small workplace, but even within my friends and whatnot, there's such a conflict between the expectations of the job, the expectations of coworkers around you, managing those relationships, managing how your life outside of work impacts work, and vice versa, that's definitely an area where there can be a lot of, does it even matter who I want to be and how I want to show up in this space? Aren't I just supposed to do my job description and go home? I think it does matter. I think workplaces that care about their employees really want you to be able to show up in a way that is wholehearted. It's freaking awesome to be who you are and own that and own that story. I think that that can be one of the most impactful ways that you decide to show up in this way, because you are interacting with other people almost as a role model, and you can really lead the way and make a big difference. And sometimes there's easier change between the people at your work than there can be amongst your family. Family might have years and years of history. I almost said trauma. Maybe it's trauma, but maybe it's just history. Whereas at your workplace, there is a little bit more separation. And so it can also be a little bit easier to practice these skills and to get good at them in the workspace where you're at, 2/3 of your life. and then be able to go from there.
I love that. I think that as we roll, I love this time of year when we're kind of wrapping up one year and we're kind of gearing up for the next year. This week, we'll take a little break from the podcast, the week between Christmas and New Year's. But as you look back on this year and you sort of do an assessment to say, what kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? How do I want to show up at home with my children? How do I want to show up at work? How do I want to show up in my community? And then looking at whether or not you are already there, or if there's some areas that you need to work on. I think it's a beautiful time to be able to say, okay, let me shore up some of my skill set. Let me shore up some of my, fill the toolbox with a few more tools that can help me so that when I am sitting here in December of 2024, then I can see the progress that I've made, that I can see that I have become more wholehearted, that I can see that I am less triggered, that I'm more responding and less reacting. And so, yeah, I love this. Love the whole time of year and love to think about. I mean, honestly, I do the falling off the wagon thing every day. How did I react to different situations? Did I have any upset? Did I have any time that I was really happy or really sad? And how do I want to do that differently in the future? Do I have any repairs that I need to make? If I didn't make them right in the moment, then really reviewing that, at the end of the day is even more helpful than probably end of year, because end of year we just sort of gloss at a high level. But then I think there's some benefit to that as well. Because in the day to day, you might be like, oh, I messed up again. But then if you look back over the whole course of like, what was I like in December of 2022? Oh, well, I have become less reactive. Okay, I have been able to say more often, oh, look, there's a human saying sentences. And I haven't just let everyone else walk around pushing the buttons on my remote control. So I love reflection.
I think that there's a lot of times where we can feel discouraged when we experience 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And yet that's still a step forward.
Mm-hmm.
And we might focus on just the step backwards, but that step forward still makes a difference. And I think even more important than the step forward is the desire to keep stepping forward, and that
100%.
push to step again and to try again and to show up again. We want to help you
100%.
guys with that, and we hope that you are able to take something from today or from any of the things that we have put out for you guys that can help you, that can help push you and give you that encouragement or that advice that you need to take another step. Stay tuned on our Instagram and Facebook and website and email list. We've got some exciting resources coming for the new year. And Angela, any last thoughts, any wrap up thoughts and encouragement going into, the Christmas week?
Yeah, I would say if you are at all able to gear down, I've been driving a 5-speed for a few weeks, and there's an element of like, I know it's a busy time of year, and are you able to slow down even just the tiniest little bit to try to be more present? Because I think when we're frantic and racing from one thing to the next, it's also a little bit easier for us to get triggered. And so as you go, maybe you step into a holiday party or a holiday situation, can you take a deep breath and exhale really big before you even walk into the situation that you want it to be joyful, you have high expectations of being joyful, but then it may not be joyful. And so try to do that in advance. And I think it will put you in a better mindset for being able to be more fully present.
I think that's great. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for listening, for sharing. Thanks for being a part of our journeys. It's always so refreshing to get to show up in such an authentic and vulnerable way, just sharing the real truth that we've been there and we see you. And we hope to just provide you at least a little glimmer of hope that it can get better. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys go be freaking awesome.